directement utile à la prévention et à la réduction des risques. Alors pour quelles raisons? D'abord parce que ça permet directement de capter l'intérêt des interlocuteurs locaux lorsqu'on aborde ces questions de risque, parce que ça permet également de déboucher sur une vision stratégique un peu nouvelle de l'aménagement du territoire, puisqu'on associe réellement des secteurs qui étaient auparavant relativement séparés ou relativement clivés, je dirais. C'est aussi une nouvelle forme de justification, la réduction des risques, pour les efforts de mise en place d'aires protégées marines et terrestres qui doivent, dans cette approche-là, être tout à fait intégrés à de véritables projets d'aménagement du territoire côtier et d'aménagement spatial maritime. Au travers de ce travail, l'IUCN a également développé son réseau en matière de compétences sur la prévention des risques, avec des têtes de réseau comme l'OD2C, comme EAM Géome, comme Climate and Coast, comme le réseau des régions atlantiques pour la prévention des risques côtiers. Et donc, il semblerait que ces nouvelles ressources qui sont mises en place aujourd'hui et qui communiquent entre elles puissent déboucher sur l'opérationnalisation d'un groupe thématique qui soit facilement mobilisable et qui apporte des expertises et des travaux de capitalisation utiles pour l'intégration, prévention des risques et conservation. Je vous remercie.
Dis peut-être que cet après-midi on a le workshop.
Peut-être, je redonne la parole à Mathieu pour 2 ou 3 points.
On a dépassé notre temps, excusez-nous, mais juste une annonce pour dire qu'à 14h30, en salle 303, on parlera pendant 2 heures de ce travail de façon plus extensive en détaillant la méthodologie. Merci beaucoup.
One quick point of clarification from Karen. Karen, you can make sure you use one of the microphones.
Jean-Jacques, thank you for your last point. We actually do have a specialized group on DRR, and we have had one for about 5 years, and you're welcome to be part of that.
Yeah.
Donc, Jean-Jacques, on a eu un groupe déjà spécialisé sur les réductions de risque.
So we've got 2 new members of the CEM working group on disaster risk reduction. Any other points of clarification, please? Just more clarification rather than content. Okay, because I'm going to come back, and I'd actually like you to think about all this in the context of what are some of the commonalities between some of these different presentations. And they were both very different. One was dealing nice tropical seaside. The first one was dealing more of the hills in Georgia and Armenia, which is a bit cooler, a bit more snowy. But just think about some of the common issues. Right, now I'm going to ask an IUCN colleague of mine to come and present on a short survey on DRR. We asked a lot of our IUCN members various questions about DRR to get some understanding to feed back into this workshop and into other events as well. Kayabo works with the Ecosystem Management Program on disaster risk reduction and is promoting our work both in policy as well as in practice. She has worked with other issues in IUCN, particularly on indigenous peoples and social policy. Obviously those are linked to disaster risk reduction. Her own background is more in anthropology and has an MSc in biodiversity conservation and management, and has got some field experience mostly in Africa, East and Southern Africa. Kaya, bienvenue.
Thanks, Ed. I'd like to thank the previous panelists for their very interesting presentations, which gave some good, very relevant context to this talk about the impressive efforts on the ground that IUCN is already involved in. As Ed mentioned, I will be presenting on a short survey that we recently carried out across our membership to see if and how we were integrating disaster risk reduction into environmental work. So in our efforts to develop a coordinated approach for ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, we need to utilize the opportunities and capacities that the Union provides. We need to do so, we need to determine the current involvements, knowledge, and experiences that present within IUCN membership, commissions, and programs. Now, earlier this year, the Nature Conservancy, TNC, and United Nations University, UNU, approached the Ecosystem Management Program at IUCN to respond to a few questions about how we were integrating disaster risk reduction aspects into conservation work. Now, we decided to extend our response to our entire membership in this initiative because we do believe that many of our members are engaged in disaster risk reduction work, and this survey provided a great opportunity for us to map and highlight the extent of this work, and thus build on that coordinated approach for ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction. So to further this effort, we worked actively in partnership with TNC, UNU, as well as the Global Network for Civil Society Organizations and Disaster Reduction. And they added another 1,000 possible respondents to this survey. The survey itself was looking at how organizations and agencies are approaching the development of priorities in the interface between conservation and disaster risk reduction and conservation objectives. So first of all, we looked at if and how environmental organizations and agencies are engaging on disaster risk reduction. And then on the other hand, whether disaster risk reduction organizations were developing environmental objectives and integrating these into their work. We also wanted to see whether, if and how these organizations were communicating this work to internal and external audiences. Now, the analysis on this data set, the full data set, is still being carried out. However, it will be fed into a review paper on advice, challenges, and opportunities that we see in the development of joint work across disaster risk reduction and environmental conservation. However, for now, I will give you just a brief snapshot, a summary of the responses we got from our membership. Out of our 1,200 or so members, there were 93 respondents. Now, to some, this may seem like a small number. However, it is significant enough for us not to ignore this area of work within our membership. Additionally, it is critical for us to identify champions within the Union to help us develop and bring this work forward, especially in the context of our next international program, where ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction is going to be a key part of showing how nature-based solutions are implemented on the ground, and that is a key part of delivering results on the ground. Something I found very interesting was that 30% of the respondents of our membership did note that disaster risk reduction was a core part of their mission. From this, we noted that a lot of the work is carried out in terrestrial areas, on erosion, droughts, and riverine floods. Therefore, not so much work is actually conducted on marine and coastal areas. The organizations who responded said that most of them focus on field projects, from which they then develop peer-reviewed publications, guidance documents, and reports. Another very interesting fact that we got from this survey was that 50% of our members who carry this work out do so in partnership. And this therefore means that networks and multidisciplinary engagement has an important role in developing and implementing this work on the ground, as well as in policy realms. This is truly a critical point because a lot of these reports and the documents resulting from the projects will need to reach wider audiences, especially those involved in decision-making and practices in the humanitarian and development sectors, as well as the climate change, those active in climate change adaptation policies and practices. Now, a few projects were reported to be designed for both disaster risk reduction and environmental objectives. They were assuming that one would benefit the other. However, there was a large part of the group that mentioned that joint results were met. The survey also showed that many organizations have changed their priorities within some programs and across some strategies, mostly in order to be more socially and environmentally responsible and to help in achieving their core objectives. And they also noted that the main reason why disaster risk reduction had not been included was due to limited capacity or financial constraints. So the Union needs to provide more guidance on developing explicitly joint projects. And we have an opportunity to do so now. Just very recently we have begun a new project called Ecosystems Protecting Infrastructures and Communities, EPIC as an acronym, which I find is quite apt. And it is supported by the German government under the International Climate Initiative. It will be in 3 regions based on 5 case studies, and will be based on documenting empirical evidence on ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, and will be engaging in national policy platforms related to disaster risk reduction, as well as produce guidance on ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction implementation. So what can we conclude from this survey? First of all, we do see that there is interest within our membership. There is progress as well in integrating disaster risk reduction and environmental work. However, this needs to be further supported. We also saw that respondents noted that the decision-making and donor communities were open to disaster risk reduction communities and environmental conservation communities to make the case for joint initiatives. We should therefore continue to provide evidence and engage multi-sectorally for this. And the survey also gives us some more information on what we can do as next steps. In order to enhance this work, we need to continue making the case for joint objectives and raise the awareness and build capacities within our membership. For this, we can undertake further training, enhance our communication, and engage more with members. We need to encourage also work on marine and coastal areas. As I noted, there was a lack of this, or most of the work has been focused on terrestrial regions. Importantly, we also have to monitor and report on the joint results. We need to design projects well from the onset and attempt to feed into common learning frameworks where we can across projects and regions. Now, given this interest from our membership, as well as other organizations, we need to continue exploring those opportunities for collaboration and build that evidence base together. There are plenty of humanitarian and development organizations out there who are working to integrate environmental aspects into their work, and IUCN can provide key and strategic capacities here. In the wider picture, what does this mean for our union? How can we move forward in terms of next steps? We need to continued clarifying and making the links between disaster risk reduction and various conservation priorities out there today. Looking at the links between disaster risk reduction, ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction, and biodiversity, protected areas, climate change adaptation, food security, governance, human well-being. This really is a nature-based solution, and IUCN is best placed to leverage this within its membership and beyond, especially in the development communities. Now, as the survey also showed, we need to continue to harness our own capacities and continue identifying partnerships and communicate these linkages further. We need to engage with that open donor community and proactively seek alternative and non-traditional funding sources, as my colleagues mentioned. The donor community is seeking win-win solutions and no-regret solutions, and this is what IUCN actively promotes ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction to be. Linked to this, as IUCN, we shall also make efforts to further enter ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction into the resilience and green growth discourses. So we should continue strengthening the arguments for ecosystem-based disaster risk reduction and its links to livelihood security, looking at the role that natural resources, a healthy natural resource base has and functioning ecosystems have for securing human well-being, especially in the context of natural hazards. Finally, we have to continue focusing on influencing conservation development planning. We need to continue that policy level advocacy and capacity building within ministries, and also need to engage with stakeholders and institutions present on the ground. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you very much, Kaya. Could we have the lights, please? Now I'm going to torture these characters here. Not torture, really. I'm going to ask them a number of questions, but equally I'm going to ask you, the audience, some of these questions. And if nobody puts up their hand, I am going to go around and say, can you give me an answer, Madam So-and-so, Monsieur So-and-so? But first I'm going to ask Karen Sudermeier to come up and join the panel. She's the lead of the Commission on Ecosystem Management Working Group on Disaster Risk Reduction. And as she said, she's been that for the last 5-6 years and has done a huge amount of work on getting the Union interested and working with DRR. And she's going to have a small presentation towards the end. Now, in case any of you are thinking of running away early, we have a slight little bribe for you. There are going to be some snacks at the end of this. So there is an incentive scheme in place. All right? So what I'm going to ask first is, I've got a number of questions, but first, as conservationists, why should we as conservationists engage with disaster risk reduction? And if one of you in the panel could just highlight a few points, and we will note them, Tedros, you'll note, we'll highlight a few points as to why, as conservationists, we should engage in disaster risk reduction. Because many people have asked me and said, DRR has nothing to do with conservation. So who'd like to, from the panel, start up? Use the microphone there, Jean-Jacques.
Merci bien. Je pense qu'il y a déjà deux dimensions qui sont très intéressantes dans la réduction des risques. La première dimension, c'est son caractère multisectoriel et que c'est une façon de réellement faire de l'intégration qui est généralement plus performante que d'autres, puisque, et c'est le deuxième point, on s'adresse à des intérêts directs des interlocuteurs et des populations locales. Donc déjà, sur ce point-là, c'est déjà très performant. Bon, le second point, ou le troisième plutôt, c'est toute la légitimité qu'on a à apporter une dimension de conservation, à associer des dimensions de conservation et de réduction des risques. Le quatrième point, c'est l'intérêt de la réduction des risques pour entrer dans des démarches plus stratégiques d'adaptation au changement climatique, en considérant que la réduction des risques, c'est en quelque sorte la dimension à court ou moyen terme de l'adaptation qui prend le relais sur des échelles de temps disons plus longues. Donc ça fait déjà 4 bonnes raisons, et ce ne sont certainement pas les seules, pour associer ces deux orientations.
Okay, who would like to give me some perspectives from the audience? Why, as conservationists, should we engage? Anybody like to? Before I come and start pointing fingers at people. I know pointing fingers is very rude. Nobody wants to? Yes. Come and could you come and up to the microphone? And maybe could I ask one of our helpers to maybe bring the microphones around?
Okay, I'll be brave.
And provide your name, organisation,
Okay.
and then